Joining us once again, Megan Rolf, beef genetics specialist here at Oklahoma State University. Megan, today we want to revisit this idea of metagenomics. And if you could just start out by giving us that kind of simplified idea of what metagenomics is.
Sure. So metagenomics is a way that we can study microbiological populations in the world around us. So it might be, for example, a sample of soil where we try and figure out what microbes are living in the soil and what they're doing. Or it might be something as simple as taking a sample from a digestive tract and trying to figure out what those microorganisms are doing.
Okay, now those are populations we've known about for quite some time. We have some ways of studying them, but what does metagenomics do for us that we haven't been able to do in the past?
In the past, we could go into these sort of communities, if you think about them like that, and take a sample, and we could try and plate it in the lab and grow it in the lab so that we could study the microorganisms that were present. And the big disadvantage of that, if you think about like a cattle rumen versus a petri dish in a lab, those conditions are very different. So sometimes the bacterial species that would grow in one place wouldn't necessarily grow in the lab. So instead, what we can do now is we can go in, take those samples, and we can sequence the DNA of all the microorganisms that are present to try and identify them and get information about what they do for the animal.
Okay. Now, normally when we meet out at the beef center and when we're talking in front of cows. Today we're here in Ag Hall. We've got a few backpacks with us. I guess this is an experiment to kind of explain what we're talking about. Take me through what we're going to do here today.
Exactly. So if we take a look at these backpacks, think about a population of students,
okay,
and we might want to figure out something about their study habits. Maybe
sure,
which ones are more studious than others. Kind of like we might take a population of cattle, okay, and try and figure out which ones are more feed efficient.
Sure. Okay.
Or why they're more feed efficient. So
right,
take a look at these backpacks, and we're going to
okay,
sample within this environment. So
okay,
let's take out our first sample here.
All right, so we've got notebooks.
Right. So both of these backpacks have notebooks, just like we might find the same species of bacteria in a rumen.
Similar things doing the similar job.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if we take another sample.
Cell phone.
Exactly. So I've got an Android phone here, and you've got an iPhone.
Right.
So these two phones perform the same function, but it's kind of like two different species of bacteria
right
in the rumen
they're still quite different.
Exactly. They're the same. They perform the same function, but they're not the same species.
Okay. Now then, all right, now I've got a pen.
And I've got a whole bunch of pens. So this would be like a difference in prevalence of bacteria. So
okay,
one animal might have fewer numbers.
Bit. The other has a whole mess of them.
Exactly.
Okay. And then I've got a big bag of Halloween candy.
And I've got a thumb drive. So sometimes we have bacteria species that we find in one animal or another, but you don't find them necessarily in both of those animals.
Some very big differences there.
Yes.
All right, so with this idea, with that way of sort of sampling things, tell me how scientists like yourself are actually using this to study cattle and study our livestock species.
One of the most common ways that this technology has been used for quite a while is to take samples from the digestive tract, so it might be fecal samples or rumen samples, and to sequence the microorganisms in there to try and figure out what species are present and how that relates to production traits like feed efficiency or growth, things like that. Another new way that we've been utilizing it is to do things like alveolar lavage, where you get a sample
okay,
from the respiratory system and sequence that to try and find out things about disease like bovine respiratory disease.
All right, fascinating. Thank you for joining us. Megan Rolf, beef genetics specialist here at Oklahoma State University.